Hello and welcome to the Average to Athletic podcast. This is going to be a new format called a Grahamble, which is a ramble by Graham. So if you aren't familiar with me, it's I'm a strength and conditioning coach. I don't even know what I define myself as anymore because labels are always limiting. But anyways, I work with people, help them get back into shape. I haven't specifically done a lot of stuff about nutrition. I've written a book about it, just as part of my own musings and trying to learn because I have a body too. Nutrition is such a complex topic, and so there's this religiosity to it where people get very specific about what you're putting in your body. I think it has to go with consumption, like what you're putting in your body. There's a whole level of like good and bad, health and disease that gets to this like religious overtone to it. People get very heated about what's good or bad. And you will never see more crazy conversations online than about nutrition. And so I pretty much stay away from it because there's so many things we don't know. One thing that's clear is that humans are really good at using a lot of different fuel sources to be able to survive. I mean, that's literally how we got where we are now. We have a very acidic stomach that was able to start with decayed meat, and we're scavengers. We eat a lot of fruit, scavenge meat, and then we learned to hunt and got better quality. We developed tools, could use fire to unlock more nutrients. I mean, it's a whole process, but really it comes from humans being adaptable. And so I think what gets lost in the mainstream conversations with studies and specific macronutrient protocols and supplements and all these things is that humans are really adaptable and we are good at surviving. And there are so many other things that factor into health, like sleep, exercise, well-being, happiness, community, that it's not just about your nutrition, but nutrition does matter. And there is a significant portion of your health that comes from what you eat or don't eat. And so I wanted to talk about some of the things that have been going on recently, specifically with my friend Mark going into this sugar fasting, sugar diet, which has blown a lot of people's minds, but it's made me think differently about a few things. And I've given a few different cues of my body. I've made some shifts as well. So I wanted to break down my understanding of the nutrition battlefield now and something that's helpful. I think if you're going to listen, then what's new or different about this, other than the typical macronutrient profile, is I've learned about some of the bacteria that goes in the gut microbiome from my friend Julian Pineau. He's the first guy I really heard talk about this stuff. And I do think this is going to be a massive shift when you start to understand the food you eat affects certain bacterial colonies in your body that then have a real estate battle that factor how your overall health unfolds. It's not something we think about or talk about much now. We kind of pay lip service to this idea of like gut microbiome, but the gut-brain axis is such a powerful thing. Your serotonergic digestion, these bacteria that produce serotonin that affect your mood, your emotions, your cravings, your consciousness. I mean, it is just, it's not too much of a stretch to say that you are your gut microbiome. So that will be the thing that unfolds in the future in some sense, but not necessarily in the probiotic prebiotic thing, but really just understanding that like what you eat really does make a difference, and your gut is you. And there might be like 1% of you that's the free will thinking, a person that rides on top of the elephant, but we'll get there. So what I wanted to get to today is a few topics, specifically what's the point of your diet? Understanding these larger concepts, specifically the lens of being energized versus satiated. And that's something that's been really helpful for me recently. How macronutrients affect the body, specifically your nervous system, your bacteria, and your metabolism. What's going on with sugar fasting and sugar dieting. How I'm starting to think about things, Futarian by day, carnivore by night. I'll talk more about that. And then what about protein, losing muscle? Because that's the biggest thing that people, what about protein? What about muscle? Which I get it. I was there too. So we'll talk about some of these things. There's a lot of stuff to discuss, and I will hope that this will be valuable for you. But also keep in mind it's a Grahamble. So, I'm going to try and tie it together to meaningful things. I have notes right there, which is big because you can already see that I like to ramble. But just keep in mind that the goal of this isn't to memorize a bunch of facts to take into your battlefield to prove to somebody else. It's just to understand what it is that you're putting in your body and improve your relationship to it, because that's a whole big thing too. Also, I've been kicked outside because I have twins now, and my former podcast studio, aka the living room, is diaper changing headquarters. So if you hear a passing by car, I'm sorry, but it's a beautiful day, good lighting, and so we'll see where we get to. So first, let's talk about the biggest theme that will set the tone for all of your nutrition, which is what's the point of what you're eating? What's the point of your diet? Now, it seems obvious, but most people don't think about it. And recently, I had this kind of paradigm, this dichotomy popping in my head of a comparison, which is, would you rather be energized or satiated? Now, the traditional lens we look at things through is that protein is the thing that gets you, you want fiber and protein that satiates you, and you want to be satiated. You wake up in the morning, you have your protein, and it satiates you, you feel full for the day. And the kind of lens has been that like sugar and carbohydrates are bad because they give you the sugar high, they make your blood glucose spike, they raise your insulin, and then you have this crash afterwards. And so the trend, I mean, I was a kid of the 90s and early 2000s, which is low fat, no fat, reduced cholesterol. Like that was the, it was all about high carb, medium protein. And that was the thing, a lot of plant heavy fiber, a lot of whole grain starches, stuff like that. And then that started to shift and give way to keto, which is this weird thing that most people don't understand, because keto doesn't just mean low carb. Like low carb is one thing. Keto is a specific dietary, it's a medical intervention is probably what I should say, which is like 80% of your calories come from fat, 10 to 15% come from protein, and then 5% or less come from carbs. But the thing is, most people that think they're on a keto diet, which is like a carnivore example, is not keto because your protein is way too high. Your protein is being turned into glucose through the Krebs cycle. It's gluconeogenesis. The specific amino acids are just turned into sugar. So if you are eating too much protein, you will turn that into sugar. And that is one of the reasons that I think the sugar fasting, sugar diet has been interesting and taken hold, is really it's not about the carbohydrates, it's about dropping the protein. And protein has kind of held this thing, and specifically, I think coming from a bodybuilding perspective, it's got this like, you need protein because if you don't have protein, you lose mass. And then we look at the senescence, we look at aging, we look at age-related muscle loss, and we're trying to encourage people to eat more protein. What's snuck under the radar is that if you take carbs out and jack protein up, you just get more glucose via protein. So that's the thing, is that if you're going to do keto, it's an intervention that happens in a short term, which is great for things healing the brain, healing the body, and there's a lot of stuff, a lot of science behind it. But it's not like a daily driver diet. And if you think you're doing keto, you're probably not. I mean, there are people that but you're weird if you're doing keto. It is like a very significant thing to do. So just keep that in mind. But as we started, so this the 2000s, 2010s, 2015s, you get to you get to keto, it becomes a thing, which is just like higher protein, lower carbs. So carbs come under attack. And so it used to be fat, now it's carbs, and then it was all insulin. So everything goes in shifts. And now it's funny that things are like, maybe I'm just on the very front edge of the wave, but it seems like things are shifting back. But like, I've been through this whole thing where carbohydrates are good. So pretty soon it'll be villainizing fat because, we'll find that some level of I don't know, too much energy is a problem, but hopefully we're swinging a little bit more towards the midline and finding a balance. Regardless, you see these trends in diet that happen over time. And so the recent trend has been painting protein is the good thing you need. You can't get too much of it. It's going to satiate you. It's going to be good. Fat's also good because it's, how your androgen hormones, your testosterone, your sex hormones, your brain, your organs all need fat. Minimizing seed oils and the omega-6 fatty acids, so the pro-inflammatory fatty acids, and getting high, good anti-inflammatory omega-3s, stuff like that. So this is a whole conversation about fat that's been the thing recently. And all that stuff is true. Just because you now understand something doesn't make it more true. That's the hard thing, is that all of the things that I've talked about fat are true, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's just finding more nuance and understanding that there's a time and a place for things. And so the goal of this conversation today is help you to sort where in your day fat may be more beneficial than carbs and vice versa, which is why I think the energized versus satiated dichotomy is so valuable, because in reality, you want to be energized all day and satiated at night. That's really what I've thought about. It's like, I don't want to be satiated during the day, because when you're satiated, you're full. I wrote this blog a while back called Stay Hungry. But when you're in a fasted state, you have a little bit more edge. You're like, you have a purpose to your day. And if I wake up and the first thing I do is just reward myself with a massive meal, guess what? I have no incentive emotionally, psychologically, spiritually to do anything the rest of the day. I just gave myself the greatest possible reward of all human existence, which is calories and energy, right? So like, obviously we're, evolved beings now and have spiritual aspirations. But the point is that energy is the currency of life. And if you give somebody energy right off the bat, they're like, well, I'm lethargic. I want to just sit around and sleep and take a nap, which is essentially what satiation does, meaningful satiation. So understanding that energized and satiated are almost opposite ends of the spectrum. And so if you choose to be satiated at the wrong time of the day, you will lose some of the waking hour and the productivity of your time. But this is something I first learned from Julian Pineau, he was the one who told me about the nervous system impact of the food you eat. So specifically, and we'll talk about the bacteria, how this really plays out, but you can think broadly, the carbohydrates and fats are energy. They are digested well. Protein is a building block. It really is what is taken out and used to build your body. So more specifically, carbohydrates, specifically the simple sugars like fruit and even the complex stuff, starches. But let's just say we'll break carbohydrates in two categories. They're simple and complex. But the simple ones, they're quick. They're just small little chains of glucose and carbon. Those are digested really fast. Even starting in your mouth, you have, even with the saliva starts to break down starches as well, but all carbohydrates start to break down in your mouth. If you're having really like something like watermelon, which is basically all, a little bit of fiber, but mostly all just fructose, that's starting to break down in your mouth and in your esophagus and into your stomach. So it is pretty much readily available energy quickly, which requires no real change of your gut acidity. And that's another thing too, the chemistry and pH of your body. So carbohydrates, and I should also preface this, nothing I say will be scientifically exact. There will be I'm riffing off the top of my head based off of notes and things that I've thought about in previous experience. But the point is to understand the gist of this. So if I don't get something exactly right, that doesn't make it wrong. So just understand that. So with that caveat, we'll move forward. Carbohydrates digested quickly. They are put into your body. And assuming you're moving or doing things through your day that require energy, that will be used. You're just basically taking it in, and it's not even getting set into the fuel tank of your muscles unless you need it, unless you've been training. It's basically just getting used by your liver, by your red blood cells. When we think about this, it's like lactate, for example, is the anaerobic breakdown of glucose. So what you're doing if you don't have oxygen, right? But it happens even in spite of oxygen. But your muscles, your red blood cells, your skin, your liver, your heart, your brain, all use lactate. They love it. So if you're getting glucose, even if you're digesting it quickly, meaning you eat it and you digest it anaerobically, which is now not having to go through the mitochondria and get the whole electron transport chain revved up, you basically just eat it, put lactate, your body uses that lactate all the time. And so in a sense, you're using the carbohydrates right away, and they're not really getting sent into these long-term storage of glycogen or, into like your fat cells, right? And the same thing too with fat, even though it's a little bit different because it has an emulsification. You eat fat, and then your gallbladder produces bile, and then your body emulsifies it and then breaks it down. It's still fast, and it still is quick energy. And so the thing is, if you're eating fat and carbs without protein, it's quick energy. Relatively speaking, carbs are first, protein or fats are second. Now, those keep you, so fat is kind of in the middle. So, but clearly, from a nervous system perspective, carbohydrates put you in a sympathetic state, which is it's the fight and flight. Very broad, not accurate, but fight, flight. Fats put you in the parasympathetic state, which is rest and digest. Sorry, not fats. Proteins put you in a parasympathetic state, which is rest, digest. You want to shut down because, and I don't know how much of this is related to it, but it takes time and effort. You have to put peps in, and there's you have to basically break down proteins through acidic destruction. So you decrease the acidity of your stomach. You lower the pH down to 2 or 3 to break down protein, and that takes time and energy. I don't know how much of this is like going into a car wash where it takes time and energy for imagine you have one of those car washes you drive through and it's off. You have to drive the car. Now you have to get the whole thing revved up, get turned on, and push a bunch of water around and soap and do the stuff. And by the time you get through, it's good. But it took a lot of energy and time for that whole thing to get set up and going. So by the time it's up and running, you're digesting things. You got the right acidity. You got the right it's peptase that breaks it down. What are those called? And the things that break down amino acids, but they're specific enzymes. It's specific enzymes that break down amino acids, so peptase in this case. But there's an acidity and a body temperature that's required for that, which means that you're going to have blood that pulls from your body, goes to your digestive tract, your enteric system, and you digest it. So that takes a lot of energy to get that whole thing up and running. Whereas the bile emulsification happens pretty much straightforward. Your body absorbs that, and then that energy can be broken down. It's just basically long chains of it's a triglyceride. So there's the glycerol head, which is like a fatty head, and then there's long carbon chains after that. So that can get broken down as well. It takes a little bit of time, different energy system. But, the point is carbs, fats energize you. Protein satiates you. Now, that's the general tone. So that will shift how you want to eat throughout the day. Now, if you eat too much fat, that's going to be a different thing. There's a lot of calories there. I don't understand exactly how fat goes because it affects the bacterial proportions. But understand and think broadly that carbs energize, protein satiates, fat somewhere in the middle. But depends on how your body manages some of these short chain fatty acids later on. So now let's break into that because that'll help you understand fats. Fat and carbs are digested and absorbed quickly in the body. So you have your mouth, esophagus, stomach, small intestine, large intestine. It works into the colon, and then you poop it out, right? When you get the small intestine is like the main energy absorptions. That's where your fats get emulsified, pulled back in, your carbohydrates pulled back in, because your stomach is very dense. It doesn't absorb very much. So the small intestine is where you get a lot of absorption. It's obviously in the large intestine too, but the bacterial proportions of your large intestine, your colon, are going to be different. And so there are two main categories of bacteria that have a real estate, or sorry, I shouldn't say two main categories. There are two large categories that we can juxtapose as being in a battle against each other. They're bacteroids and Prevotella. Prevotella, there's a guy, a French researcher, Barefoot, and he named him Prevotella is the bacteria. So it's a little weird. But these types of bacteria they're like species, and there's subspecies of them. So there's subspecies of bacteroids and subspecies of Prevotella. Now, there are good subspecies and bad subspecies, obviously very oversimplified, but the good ones are the ones we want to support. And so if you are eating a diet in foods that support Prevotella, you will have a Prevotella-rich microbiome in your gut, and that produces a certain end product. And if you have no competing bacteroids, then you will end up in a situation where there's ample real estate for both the good and bad colonies of this Prevotella to take hold, to take root, right? The same thing is true for the bacteroids. If you eat a diet that supports bacteroids, and of course, these are complex words. If I mispronounce them, you'll forgive me. If you don't have a competing Prevotella presence, then you have ample space for the good and bad bacteroid colonies to be there. And now, I'm not saying it's just as simple as a mutual exclusion, meaning if you don't have one, the other therefore gets there. But generally, people don't eat the best thing. And so if you have inflammation in the diet, toxin exposure, microplastics, pesticides, you're eating processed foods, who knows, any of the 10 or 15 different components that go into like things that make your body unhealthy or unhappy or injured, those things can also support different bacterial populations as well. So it's not as simple as just these two, but they are the big key players, right? So understand that it's not just like, because you could eat an ideal diet that would support a healthy Prevotella population and just be totally good, even if there's low bacteroids, because you're not eating a bunch of the other junk food, which is why I think people could be pretty strict on like a vegetarian or a Futarian or a carnivore diet and be successful, or an animal based as well, or to be successful, because like it's not so much that they're eating the good stuff. They're just really minimizing the bad stuff to the extent that the diet allows you to do that. So just understand that that's a factor in as well. But the bacteroids come from, and so the broad thing is that your Prevotella is a more vegetarian diet. It's high fiber, high carbohydrate ish, complex carbohydrates, starches, stuff like that. But it's really the fiber is what matters. And when we look at the bacteroid, it's considered a Western diet, but it's fats, proteins, and the bacteroids can digest anything, whereas they can digest anything: fats, proteins, complex carbohydrates, some fibers. Prevotella really just does plant fiber-dense foods, which means the foods you eat, when you eat them, and the combinations you eat them make a difference. Now, if you're getting a fiber-dense food, bacteroids can handle that, but your Prevotella do it better. But if you're eating a processed high-protein diet, because I'll say fat as well, because fat and protein typically pair together. This is where it gets harder, because in the wild, there are carbohydrate sources and fat and protein sources and protein sources, meaning you can get some protein that's very lean and you get a lot of protein that's fatty, and then you can get the animal like, eggs, dairy, fat and protein, but fattier, and then carbohydrates, which are just carbs. Of course, there's some protein in there, but really, like, unless you're doing avocado or coconut or olives, like, there's not that much fat in them. And even then you have to really condense that. So what I want you to think about is that if you're eating a diet high in protein, you're supporting bacteroids. If you're eating a diet high in fiber, you're supporting Prevotella. Now, these have end products that change how what you produce. So these are specifically short chain fatty acids, which are basically the end product of fermentation of fiber, which is why if you look at even like gorillas, everyone talks about, gorillas are so strong because they're eating plants. It's like, well, those plants are fermented by bacteria in the gut to make fatty acids. And so those fatty acids are what support they nourish organs. They can be used in a ketotic state. They can be used, they're broken down for fuel elsewhere in the body, and different, like there's three main ones: acetate, butyrol, and propionate. Those are the three main productions. And so Prevotella bacteria, these are the plant, I want, it's not this simple, but I'll just say animal-based meat protein is going to be your bacterial supportive, and the vegetarian-based will be your Prevotella support. Because if you have high protein, you're throwing off you're in the bacteroids regardless. And so it's not just plant-based, but most plant-based diets are hard to get a lot of a lot of protein on. So just broadly speaking, meat is going to support bacteroids. Plants are going to support Prevotella. Very oversimplified, but it helps you kind of paint these things. Because remember, the motivating thing for bacteroids is protein. The motivating fuel for Prevotella is fiber. So if you eat a diet that's high in fiber, you're going to support a Prevotella bacteria, and those ferment the fiber to create butyrate specifically. And butyrate is going to be the fuel source for your colon. And there's going to be the cholenocytes, which are the cells that line your colon, prevent leaky gut syndrome, SIBO, stuff like that, because that's where the bacteria goes back into the small intestine. But they also support the other bacteria. So you can think of the fiber, which takes a few hours to get to the colon, and then a few hours. So you're thinking 8 to 12 hours for this fiber to digest and create short-chain fatty acids that then act as fuel for the body. And so they go and they nourish other things. Acetate is the other product. So you can look at Prevotella. They're making a lot of butyrate, a lot of acetate. And that acetate is a major messenger for the body. It's a fuel that can nourish organs. It can obviously the body can use it as a fuel source, but really it just tells the body there's a satiation. So what you get from a fiber-rich diet is a messenger that tells the body, hey, we're satiated. But this is where you get GLP-1s and PYY, which are messenger peptides. Maybe not peptides, but they're messenger hormones that tell the body we're satiated. It's different than the type of satiation you get with the parasympathetic, which is the rest and digest heavy protein signal. Meaning you eat fiber, it's not like you're saying, oh, I'm so full. You will get full. Like if you eat a mango and you eat some of these, you're going to feel full. But a lot of that's the water content that fills you up. It's more of like a gentle ride of like, oh, I'm not like hungry, but I'm not full. Like I can kind of just chill and roll. And to put this into a picture, I remember watching Chimp Empire. So there's a great TV show. If you want to watch, learn about human nature, watch this show about chimps. The Chimp Empire, these animals, they would fight for territory under the fruit trees. And so they would go and like there was the best fruit trees, and they, they're in Africa, so it's like summer year round ish, and they're we're in these rainforests, and so there's fruit at some point all year round. And these fruit trees, these monkeys would just sit in these trees and eat fruit all day, and they would hunt sometimes, and if they get some meat, but you'd think a lot of that is more of like they weren't getting big animals, and even then it's like there was more of a status thing where you're sharing the stuff. Obviously it's good to get protein. You get some protein from fruit, but it's it's like it's a weird thing because like they're getting this and it's a status symbol of I got the food, I want to share it with this person, not with you. And then you get like the nutrients from the organs of those animals. There's a lot that goes into it, but it's not just like, oh, we need a lot of protein, so we have to go kill massive animals, which is something that obviously allowed humans to grow and shift and change the fat-rich diets and stuff like that. Historically, like you could think of like the monkeys, they just eat fruit all day, which humans can do too. And so that's part of this, is that fruit-heavy diet is going to support the Prevotella. And so that is an energizing source of fuel that then keeps you satiated, but not in a way that shuts you down. Therefore, you're energized as opposed to drowsy and, lethargic. So that is the Prevotella, the short chain fatty acids. We got butyrol, which feeds the colon, and then we got acetate, which is a full message for the body. And then the propionate, let me just double check my notes here. The propionate is a little bit more of it's a short chain fatty acid body. This is what gets sent out to the body as a fuel source. And so you're looking at it nourishes, okay. Yep. This is the third one. So there's butyrol, there's acetate, which is just like a messenger through the body, tells the body what's going on. And then let me start from the simple. Butyrate fuels the colon, healthy gut microbiome. Acetate, message through the body, tells the body we're kind of satiated. And then propionate is the fuel for the rest of the body. So it nourishes the liver, it helps to regulate blood sugar. It basically can be used as a fuel in other places. It supports heart health and mitigates cholesterol. So it's kind of like a buffer for the rest of the body in terms of the other energy sources it needs. So you can kind of think of propionate as, if your body handles it well, which is another thing, that is the diet's high in fiber going to create propionate, which is kind of a long-term fuel, which kind of just satiates the body and keeps you from these massive energy spikes. And so I think the argument and I don't know this to be true, but it would make sense to me that if a plant-heavy diet, if you're eating plants consistently at repeated intervals, so let's just say I wake up and I have fruit all day, I'm having carbohydrates, but you might say one day I'm going to crash because like all the carbohydrates I haven't had fiber. But if I do that again, 12 hours later, well, guess what? I have fiber kind of circulating in my body through this long-term Let's say if you wake up at 8 and you start having fruit at like 11 and you eat fruit from 11 to 7, that's 8 hours. Okay, so then 12 hours later, you're going to start to have fiber. And so that fiber that gets produced, so the fiber emulsification and the fermentation of 8 to 12 hours later starts to produce some of this propionate, which is going through the body. And that's just kind of acting as this gentle fuel cell that's keeping you from having these energy crashes. So the next day when I'm eating fruit and I'm getting the sugar from the fructose and the glucose and different simple carbohydrates or carbohydrates, my body is not crashing because I have this propionate as well. So you can kind of see this happening as like a fuel that you get the short, quick energy and the long-term satiation, but that it's a gentle level that just kind of keeps you in this balanced state because it's a backup fuel if you need it. So just keep that in mind. Like that's where I think a lot of the rationale for this plant-heavy fruit diet, which comes in. So the hard part is you get a vegetarian diet that's like, legumes and, leafy greens and tubers and stuff like that. There's not much energy in that. So I think that's why this is why I think there's some nuance coming in where you could see, and I'm working on thoughts in real time, but like the typical vegetarian diet where they have just a bunch of salads and leans and quinoa and lentils and, tofu, stuff like that. It's like, because even the vegetarians that are plant heavy, they were also like sugar's bad, fructose is bad. It's going to give you fatty, non-fatty acid or non-fatty liver disease. It's going to destroy your blood sugar. And so, fruit's bad, limit it. Fruit's been villainized forever, but what if it's not the thing that we think? It's just, a fuel source. And the real problem is you have to have energy and movement. Oh, the idea though is that like you could see the rationale for a plant-based diet that's fruit heavy and how that would really make sense. And then you have lean protein later on, but we'll talk about that in a second. So that is the short chain fatty acid production of a prevotellahide diet. Bacteroids do the same thing. They don't make as much butyrol. So bacteroids don't make the same level of the short chain fatty acid butyrol that Prevotella does, which would nourish the gut, which you could see is why they say eat fiber. I always heard the fiber thing as, eat fiber so you can poop a lot. It's like, I don't think that's really the point. I don't really care how big my poops are. What I do care is how nourished my organs and my gut microbiome and my colon is. So that's when I started to realize, there's more to the fiber than meets the eye, so to speak, or meets the, I don't know, digestive tract. I'll stop my dad jokes. This fiber is really about nourishing the body in this kind of sustainable thing, and it's not about the poop. Even though I think that's just what we measure. We have this weird thing where we overvalue things we can measure and undervalue things that actually they're hidden metrics. But regardless, diets that are high in protein, they create acetate and propionate, but a little bit more of the different proportions. So they're lower butyrol, higher propionate than a diet that supports a Prevotella. So animal-based diets are going to give you more of this. They're not going to give you the same nourishment for your gut, and that's fine because if you're not getting the sugars and processed food and stuff like that support the bad, quote unquote, bad bacteria, which exceed my knowledge at this point, you're going to be okay. And you're not going to have an override of that stuff. But just understand this trade-off. And it's like, why make it harder? The end result of what I'm getting to is why make it harder for yourself than you need to. So that summarizes this, like the impact it has on your body, but your macronutrients impact the body through your nervous system, either parasympathetic or sympathetic, fight or flight or rest or digest, the bacteria, which is either Prevotella or bacteroids, and then your metabolism. Your ability to use energy is a marker of your metabolic capacity. And so your metabolism is basically your ability to digest fuel and to put it into use. And so carbohydrates are very simple. It takes no effort and even no oxygen to be able to manage it. That is the lowest form of fermentation, which is glycolysis, is the lowest form of energy production. That's why we call it lactic acid. It's lactate. It's found in milk, but this is some of the earliest things we can study. But this is, before there was oxygen, this is how life flourished on Earth. And then you get this, obviously the emulsification and the breakdown of fats into short chain fatty acids or just, fatty glycerol chains in the body. I forget the exact method. I think I forget the exact method of fat metabolism in the body, but essentially we break it down and then turn it into whatever fuel we need. And then, or ketones, that whole secondary fuel source, which is more of an emergency thing. And then you get protein, which is what we talk about, the turn the car wash on, a lot more energy. And it's just not really a good fuel source, but it can be if your body needs it, because your body loves glucose. It loves lactate. It loves those things. It's very happy, and ketones work as well. So those are the energy sources. And so the problem is that we've had a diet in the recent, few years and decades that has been prescribed to us that gives us little energy. And so that's going to be your high protein diet. It's just no energy. And so you're satiated all the time, and it takes a lot of energy, and it potentially makes you more acidic. So, that's where you start to see, okay, we are ripe for a little bit of a shakeup. That's where we get to the sugar diet and the sugar fasting, which I think is a better thing. Our friend Mark Bell started, the last few years, last few weeks, which is interesting because he wrote The War on Carbs and he was very keto, he still sees value and understands that stuff. But I think he figured out something through conversations with other people that if you just shut the protein way down and cut the fat out, that's when you get to a different fuel source. And so I saw a guy post yesterday and he was talking about how that same effect happens if you have high fat and high carbs but low protein. So it seems that if you just cut the protein out, your body unlocks more energy. And I wonder if that's because of the acidic load that digesting protein has. And so the thing to remember is, well, there's still a value and a need for protein. It's just putting it at the right time of the day, because this is where people love to take one thing and say, oh, it makes your body acidic. That sounds bad, so we don't want to do that. Or, oh, there's fiber, you're missing your fiber. They like to have these one talking points, but it's like there's such a complex thing that we need all of these things. They're there. It's important. But how much and how often and in what ratio, that's a more nuanced conversation. So Mark started doing this thing where he just basically was like, any sugar that matters. We want no fat. We want no protein. And so he was doing things like candy, no fat candy, fruit juice, honey, maple syrup, and soda, which, he's exploring. He's finding things as you go, like whether or not that's ideal is second, but it's like he's exploring things and people are blowing up. He's like, oh my God, it's going to kill you. It's going to do this stuff. And it's undoing all this. It's funny. It's like we have to protect the mainstream population because if we tell them something, it's going to be too dangerous and they're going to undo all these things and they're going to stop eating healthy foods. It's like the people that'll do that weren't eating healthy foods to begin with. But what I think it ended up maturing into is more of a sugar fast. And so what that gets to is the idea of your body is primed to digest glucose. So if you eat glucose, it requires little effort for your digestive system and it doesn't reach the gut microbiome because it is digested before it gets to the colon and these heavier sources. So if it doesn't reach this part of your body, then you're not shifting into a parasympathetic state. And so you have energy all day and your body is primed for that, which means you can just keep going. You have more energy without shifting into different. It unlocks a different state of energy for your body. And so that creates, I don't know if this is also just the higher, cutting out protein allows people to eat more of a diet. I mean, there's levels to it. So one is that you have more energy, you do more, you feel better. And so even though you're in managing your calories, it's like your body's using that and you're burning higher body temperature. And we know that when you cut the calories down, your body's adjusting metabolism in steps. So you're going to cut down on your body temperature, you're going to feel lethargic, you're going to do less, your body will just do less. But if you jack up and rev up that engine with a lot of carbohydrates and no fat, no protein, your body feels good, but it's burning carbohydrates. When I eat carbohydrates, you'll feel your body warm up. You get this flush. Your temperature's up, metabolism's increased, you're just moving and doing more. So you have more energy. Therefore, that increases the overall output of your system, which revs your system. That's one way of thinking why because he's doing it specifically for weight loss, trying to lean out. And so that's important because what you're trying to get from your diet matters. But he was eating, 4,000 calories a day on carbohydrates and still losing weight. It's like, okay, well, it doesn't mean that he's in a calorie deficit. It means that he's revving up his body and he's starting to pull more energy and he's probably exhaling more carbon dioxide because that's what happens when you break down carbon. You exhale out carbon dioxide. But it also could be that you're eating higher fiber and you're cutting the protein out. You're now giving the prevotella a chance to flourish more, and that's going to change the bacterial composition of your body. And so maybe in a Western diet that's very high in protein, that might be what's missing for a lot of people. So cutting the protein out is beneficial because I really do think that the benefit of all this stuff is cutting out protein or cutting down on protein. And it's not even cutting that out because that's what people miss is it's not that, it's just resetting to a healthy relationship with protein. So that's the sugar thing. And so what I think he's maturing to, because the sugar diet is not a thing. I think he just said that at the beginning, and maybe it's just flashy, but there is no such thing as a sugar diet. It's not sustainable, and it will burn out. He's on testosterone and some other hormonal replacements, which are going to let him rev a little bit higher. But I was talking, Julian pointed this out as well. It's like, he's going to get a few months or a few weeks, maybe even 2-3 months, and then he's going to have the burnout because you can't tax your system. Sorry, somebody driving by on a motorcycle. You can't tax your system unending and a sympathetic state and not have that burnout. People who don't have that or a different nervous system, different predispositions will burn out after a few days, a few weeks. But what it works really well is like a sugar fast. And so eating no protein, very low fat, and all sugar puts you in a situation where you have constant energy. And you're doing that for a day, 72 days, 72 hours, a week. You can really rev up and shift your metabolism. I mean, that might be healing certain things. Be giving your body a chance away from the acidic load of digesting protein. Who knows? But those things are all there. And it could just simply be that you're getting more protein, and that's, you're getting less calories, you're losing weight because you are, even though you're thinking you're eating a lot of carbohydrates, you're eating less calories overall because it's really tough to eat a bunch of fruit all day and a bunch of carbohydrates. It's hard to do a macronutrient exclusion diet and get too many calories. So maybe you're just getting a lot of fiber. I don't know exactly how it works or why it works, but it is working. And that's what is interesting. Now, my question was, I'm not about the down Jolly Ranchers. I don't really like that stuff. And that is crack for your brain. And we know this. And so like, even I'm raising infants and they're my twins now. It's like the first 1,000 days without sugar. You think I'm going to sit there and feed them that stuff? So like, if it's true now, if it's true then, it's true now. And so that's one of those things too. All the things about fats and, fueling your body and your hormones and your androgens and getting the avoiding omega-6s and all that stuff is true. Proteins are important for supporting muscle maintenance and keeping your body healthy and supporting your overall structure and amino acids. Still true. Carbohydrates is a great fuel source, and the fact that your body loves glucose and protein or lactate, still true. So just because something new comes to light doesn't mean the other stuff is not true. That's the thing to remember, is that it's all true. So how do you put this together into a simple plan that works and maximizes stuff? So this is where you start thinking about the idea of a fast is if you expand the notion of fast, typically means, no food or no water, nothing going into your system. But it's like, well, if you're fasting from satiating macronutrients, you're still your body hasn't shifted states. So you could think of the idea of a fast as avoiding something that shifts your state. So if I'm fasting from, I don't look at porn, but porn is an example a lot of people use, or fasting from TV or social media, whatever these things. Like what you're doing is you're just avoiding that thing that shifts your state. Therefore, if you know that social media puts you in this dopamine driven, or whatever, reactive state that you don't like, you fast from it, which is I'm staying in the state I'm abstaining from alcohol, which puts me in a different state. So a fast is just really avoiding a certain state change that is created by an external source. So TV, social media, video games, whatever you want to say. I'm avoiding that state change because I'm no longer putting that external source into my body. Okay. So if the state change you're avoiding is satiation and you want to stay energized, then a sugar fast makes sense because you're avoiding shifting into this, rest and digest, like I'm just going to be lethargic and I'm shifting into this acidic state, whatever the state is. I don't know exactly what it is, but you can kind of see some of these parallels there. That's what a fast is. Okay, great. So then by eating sugar all day, which is weird because we think of a fast with food as being no calories, by eating carbohydrates, readily absorbable energy that does not shift you into a different it does not shift you into digestion, you're in a fast, but you're in a fast from digestion, which is very interesting. That's a novel thing. I think that's the major thing that's happening from this movement towards this. Well, not movement. I don't know. Maybe it's a flash in the pan. Who knows? But people are up in arms about it, which is amazing. I think that's the real thing, is that you're just avoiding a shift into the digestion. And you do that for a long period of time. It lets your gut bacteria shift. Because if you're getting fruit, you're still getting fiber, right? But we don't think of that as an energy source. So you're still nourishing your gut microbiome, but you're avoiding the acidity, chemistry changes, and the things that support a bacterioid population, which is probably what we already have a lot of. So you just see it's a normalization. So what does this look like to have long term? Well, this is where you go Futarian by day, carnivore by night. Now, I'll say those are obviously things you get dogmatic because people are like, oh, I'm this. It's like my religion is not my food. And I will say ish with all this stuff. Futarian-ish by day and carnivore-ish by night. Because guess what? You know what? Like, I understand the shift. If I have some protein during the day, it's going to make me a little tired and have a drop. I've been doing this for a few weeks now, but it's still, I'm at the coming up on the 2-week mark, but I'm refining it and learning as you go. And I've been shifting towards more carbohydrates and doing this for about a year now. And so I'll say specifically, I noticed that my blood work was always high on the BUN and the creatinine ratio. So like the BUN, blood, urine, nitrogen. So basically all protein. Oh, let me explain PRAL too. This is complex, but it'll make sense. It's a potential renal acid load, meaning the food you eat shifts how your body processes it, and that creates a metabolite of that digestion, creates an outcome that is to shift the acidity of your body, specifically the kidneys that have to filter the blood out. So if you eat a diet that's high in phosphorus or nitrogen, which are the main things of protein, the amino acids, that will create an acidic burden on your kidneys. Is that bad? No. Too much of it? Of course. So remember, everything is because people hear acid and they go, oh, well, I want to be alkaline because alkaline water and I got to be all like, no, that is oversimplified and misses the point that your body is great at locally adjusting pH to create a specific outcome. That is digestion. Digestion is simply locally adjusting pH to create a specific outcome. That's metabolism. That's how we break down. That's how we exchange respiration for oxygen and carbon dioxide. It's all of your body is just locally adjusting carbon dioxide. Locally adjusting chemistry, which is just pH. You're just shifting the electrons you're giving and taking. Just that's the key to remember, is that's how everything in your body works, is local adaptation of chemistry. Now, Too much of that, where you're only doing this stuff, puts a consistent load and creates an acidic environment in different parts of your body, specifically your kidneys, and that can create the formation for. Remember, acidic, it just means that you have things that rob electrons. They steal electrons. That's why things dehydrate. You put a body into an acidic vat, and these, carbonic acid, hydrochloric acid, which is your stomach acid, basically they're hydrogen and chloride, HCl, hungry for electrons. And so it is unstable in a way that steals electrons. And so what that does is basically takes your H2O, hydrogen, two dihydrogen oxide, two hydrogens oxide, and rips those hydrogens off. So it rips it, and then now you get oxygen vapors that go away, and so you lose this in terms of carbon dioxide and other breakdowns, oxygen things. And once you lose the water form, and then guess what? You dehydrate, and things shrivels up, and it goes to nothing. That's how acidic destruction works. It's just things boil and disappear. So that specific chemistry creates a relationship between different atoms that can create things like kidney stones and can put a nitrogen they form because of this long-term unnatural environment. So that's we start to notice that, like, okay, my BUN and stuff like, and we're probably dehydrated, stuff like that. But after years, I'm like, this is a little too high, because I was did the bodybuilding thing in college, and then afterwards I always protein shake, had high meat, a lot of protein for 10 years, and then the last year or so, I noticed my urethra started to hurt when I'd pee. It's just like a little tube that takes urine from your bladder to all the way out. And I was like, that's not good. And so I started to play like, I don't really need 2 pounds of meat and a protein shake. Okay, let me cut the protein shake out. Well, I don't really need 2 pounds of meat, so let's do 1.5 pounds. Oh, okay. And so then it was like, well, I don't really need protein during the day. And so I started doing this shift over the years, and I started to notice, okay, the urethra's feeling better. And I don't know exactly what it is. I'm just, working as I go, looking at blood test. But I noticed my last blood test, when I cut out the protein shakes and some of the protein, oh, wow, my BUN was better than it had been prior. So it's not, and this isn't an animal-based protein. It's a protein thing, because protein is amino acids. And it's like you call them meat completely. It's nothing to do with meat versus plant protein. It's protein. So high protein diets put this type of stress in your body. Again, stress is not a problem. It's just the way we describe an event that your body goes through. So it puts that in it all long term in the absence of things that are alkalizing. So that'd be fruits or vegetables, meaning you're like carb. And I did carnivore pretty strict for a year and a half. And I was eating 6 eggs a day, and then about 2 pounds of meat a night, and not much else, organs, stuff like that. And at the time, it was great for me. I mean, my thyroid corrected. I had a lot of things. And then eventually, you realize that things shift and change, and it's time to find something new. And so that's kind of, I moved out to California, met a girl, got married, and she didn't like to eat meat and organs all the time, surprisingly. So we started to have more vegetables and stuff like that, and things shifted. And so, like, okay, seasons change, I'll change. That's fine. What that ended up getting to is like, all right, let me start to just shift and like move away from protein during the day. And so I still have my 6 eggs, but I noticed I'd have my yogurt in the day. And then I was like, well, I'm like not really thriving because I have this big crash in the afternoon. And so that's when all the stuff with the sugar diet started. I'm like, well, let me look into this. And so I started to reflect on this whole shift towards, minimizing protein. And it's like, oh, this makes sense. And I talked to Julian, learned about the bacteroids and the Prevotella, and they got microcystis, and he's the one. I mean, he's been eating like this, similar to this, for a long time. So it's like I would credit so much of this to him. But that's where I'm at now. It's like, okay, what does this look like to have a sustainable thing? Fruit by day. You just eat fruit. It's great. You love it, and you just have it all day. And you can have fruit, or this is where it gets a little bit, you really want something that avoids like fiber-rich food that is low in, you can have carbohydrates and fat. You can have simple sugars and fat during the day, pretty much as you want. Or fiber-rich like oats, grains that would be digested by bacteria, support by Prevotella bacteria, because that's where you start to get. So again, if you're eating fruit, the fiber in the fruit is not without. But the fiber in the fruit reaches the Prevotella, and then that creates a short-chain fatty acid that creates a sustainable satiety, right? And so the energized part of your day comes from energy-rich food. So fat and carbs in the absence of protein. So that's where you can get like cream or something like that, like dairy. Again, butter, stuff like that. It's fat-rich. So what I found is that I can have a big thing of oatmeal with fruit and and cream. My wife makes this amazing cream, very low protein. But I feel great, and I do not, because that oatmeal, and so there's a whole list of things. If you look up foods that support Prevotella, that would be the list of things that, like, grains, oats, stuff like that. I think legumes and beans and stuff like that a little bit more. If they're higher in protein, that's when they're going to shift to the bacteroids. And so again, this goes against like the whole thing of, there's other things that go into, like, the pesticides go in the oats and all this stuff, and it like messes up your gut. Like, I just think the whole thing with the gut is far more complex than we need, but this is something I'm working on, so feel free to disagree. But the strictest interpretation would just be eat nothing but fruit all day, honey, maple syrup, fruit juice, all fine. You're energized. As long as you're moving, you're doing stuff, you're going to use that energy. And then you just have meat or animal-based at night, so you can have your starches then, because that takes a little longer to digest. But by the time you're eating protein, whenever you have protein, you're switching to bacterioids. And it's kind of like, all right, you just open up they can do fiber, they can do starches, they can do fat, they can do bacteria or protein. So when you introduce protein in your diet, that's when you shift your state. So I've got no protein throughout the day, so it's just fruit. And I'm okay with fruit in fibrous foods like oatmeal and stuff like that. And then fats, no protein. Very little protein. You'll find the specific thing. It works well for me. And again, there's a genetic predisposition, whether or not how, like, your real estate, how much Bacteria versus bacteroids, that's a specific thing. So I'm not going to say this will work for everybody, but the idea though is you'll find kind of your balance of like, oh, if you have an energy crash afterwards and you're sleeping well at night, you ate something that shifted you into a parasympathetic state. So if you're not sleeping well at night and you're having caffeine all day and then you eat something and you have energy crash, you might just need to sleep more. So don't blame it on the diet. But if you're sleeping well at night and you eat something and then 15 to 30 minutes later you have this big crash and you want to take a nap, something's off there. And so that would be something, whatever you ate is either too high in protein or you're eating too starchy, too dense of a fibrous food. Sorry, too fatty of a food. Fiber is different. Sorry, you're eating protein or too fatty of a food that switched into a bacterial production, and that's going to just, what that means is it takes more from your body to digest. So anything that takes some from your body to digest will shift you into this parasympathetic nap state. All that said is, if you need a strict interpretation of the diet, Futarian during the day, just fruit juice, honey, maple syrup. At night, go animal-based, and you could be as strict as just meat at night, and you're going to do the protein. And depending, if you want to minimize your calories, then you eat lean meat, and you do, meat with like a lower protein, because the thing was meat, higher protein, lower fat, because that's going to minimize the overall calories if you're trying to lose weight. If you're trying to maintain weight, then eat fatty meat. You're going to be fine. But shift that where it's the quick digesting carbohydrates are at one period of time, and then your fat and your protein and your starches are going to be at another time. So at dinner, for example, something like white rice would be an example of something that digests really quickly and there's no fiber in it. So that white rice, it would be the same as like candy or fruit in some sense, but minus the fiber, fruit juice, because it's not going to reach the gut. Whatever doesn't reach the colon does not doesn't really impact your gut microbiome in the same way. So that's protein and fiber. Those are the two things that are going to make the difference. Fat, carbohydrates, those are different. Starch is a little more fibrous, and so that will fall in the category of fiber. So you can think of four main macronutrients: carbohydrate, starch, protein, fat. Carbohydrates and fat, those are not really going to get digested in a way that's going to reach the bacteria of your microbiome in your colon. Proteins and fibers, those will. So eat those, understand those. But if it's just fiber, it's just going to get to your patella, and so fibrous fruit would be fine, as opposed to something like let's say a potato, which is a complex carbohydrate and then nothing simple. That's going to you're not going to get any energy from that. It's just going to go and be digested. Now, if you just ate potatoes, you would probably you'd still be in that patella diet because it's just the fiber later on, but nobody eats potatoes. Like, that's just not, you could eat maybe a potato, like with butter, that would be something. But like most of the time, people don't eat starches by themselves. They have something else, starches and the protein, meat and potatoes. It's like, just understand that there's these variables there. So if you want to start simple, at night, do your protein, your starches. And day, do your quick carbohydrates, your fruit, and stay energized, and your fat, if you can do fat with low protein. So I try to repeat this as many times as possible to help you like really get the gist of it, but it is like, I don't want to get too long in the tooth here. And so the last thing, what about my protein? This is the number one thing people say, and I think that this is really important to finish on. The number one thing people say when you talk about eating less protein is, but what about my muscle? I don't want to lose muscle. What about my protein? And we've had it drilled in our head for so long that if you don't eat protein, you'll lose your muscle, that we miss the most common thought, which is, your body does not keep muscle around if it's not being used. If you have to eat protein to keep muscle, it's not muscle. It's just fluffy fat that's areolar tissue. It's not areolar, fibril. It's like a tissue that goes under your skin that kind of fills this areolar label. Or forget that word. I don't know where that popped into. It's just this fattier tissue that kind of makes fluffier muscle. And so it kind of fills in this the space around it. So it's not dense, collagen-rich, fascial-bound, hydrostatic gel that you can shape shift, that creates a firm tendon connection to your body. That's muscle. If you don't have muscle that you don't use. If you are using your muscle, your body will not lose it. You might lose extra muscle, and let's just say you're a very lean person, like a mountain climber, and you're using muscle, but like here's the thing is, do you want muscle or do you want to be strong? Because those two things are not the same thing. They generally are synonymous, but you can have big fluffy muscles and not be strong. And you can have very thin, like very wired, strong muscles that are connective tissue dense, and they can grip and hang and move your body. And you can be incredibly explosive and strong and not be big. So the question is, are you just trying to look a certain way? Because in that case, it's like you have to be clear on your incentives. But if you want to be strong, functional, and healthy, then having what looks like muscle that kind of like, I'll say it this way. There is a certain tensile strength of tissue that creates the functional capacity in life that we use. Now, that would be the collagen-rich fascia, tendon, and muscle. And you don't need as much muscle to create a dense pull. But muscle that pushes and pulls into a full range of motion remodels and stretches, so you get a different collagen packing based off of what you do. Plyometrics, explosive work create a different look than someone who does partial range of motion, body lift, bodybuilding, and stuff like that. Now, obviously, I'm realizing this is going to be different. Maybe this is another Grahamble, but the point is, if you want to be strong and capable, your body will refine to be as effective and efficient as possible. Having a bunch of extra mass in the form of quote unquote muscle on your body is no different than having fat in terms of the impact on your joints. If you are strong, if you're jacked and yoked and you're eating a caloric excess, yes, your body won't break down anything else, but you also won't break down fat and you won't break down anything else. But the fattier, like I don't know this to be exactly true, but it's the only way I could describe it is the water and the fat that kind of meshes into your muscle that makes it look fluffier and bigger isn't actually helping your performance. It might give you space and, protect tissue and stuff like that. But the thing is, the underlying message is if you are using your muscle, you will not lose it. You might not be as big if you're eating less calories, but is that what you want, just to be big and to walk around? Or do you want to be functional, strong, and efficient? Because there is a change in your overall health markers, your nervous system state, and your coordination that happens when you are effective and you're not carrying more than you need to. And so you can still be big and strong. And the other thing is, you don't need 2 pounds, or you need less protein than you think you need to. Like a half a pound per body weight, half a gram per pound body weight is a great, fine place to be. You're not going to lose protein there. And like the other thing too is that if you have enough protein to offset synthesis and you have enough calories so you're not losing weight, your body will not lose you're not going to lose any muscle, because the thing that would go first would be the fat, like the obvious energy store. So, and I don't know how much of this is like a glycogen thing as well. I should mention that, like, your muscles look full and filled because of glycogen store. So, that is going to be a huge part there. So if you're eating a ton of carbohydrates and fructose and your energy, you're going to fluff those muscles up with glycogen. So like eating low five, like that's the thing. Your body is not just taking, if you're eating a lot of protein, your body is low carb, high protein, your body's just turning the extra protein into carbs, which means that you're creating insulin resistance in a way, because you're not effectively, you're creating problems for yourself because you're using a fuel that's getting subverted into a different fuel. You only need as much protein as you need, which is less than you think. But the thing that's going to make your muscles feel full and fluffy is the carbohydrates or the glycogen. So just keep that in mind. Is like, if you are using your body, you will not get rid of the things that it needs to be successful. So that's the biggest gist. You're not going to lose muscle. You might just lose fat. But if you're in a calorie surplus or calorie maintenance and you're having baseline protein and you're getting a lot of carbohydrates, your muscles will look the same. You're going to lean out, if anything. So anyways, that's enough of this Grahamble. I would like to think that it was good, but I'm sure that it was much more of a ramble than... Anyways, there's a lot of stuff in there, but you'll take it. The point is it's messy and we're moving further in the nutrition space. But thanks for tuning into this TED Talk, and let me know what you think. Either shoot me a message or comment on this, and I will refine and improve these Grahambles, but I think I'll be doing these more for the podcast because they're easy and gets me outside for a little bit, you know? All right. Well, thank you. Otherwise, if you want anything else, I don't know. I have a free 5-day running program that if you want to get involved and learn how to move and take care of that, then just go to the website, barefootsprinter.com. Everything you can get is there. Or you can message me at the Barefoot Sprinter on Instagram and anything else like that. Hey, beautiful. Stay beautiful. Talk soon.